Dear you, there is an incredible self-supporting mission project in Honduras called Vida International. What makes this project in many ways so unique is the fact that it was started by young people around 18, 19, 20 years old in the year 2007. In 2020, 13 years later, the project is still run and managed by young people. Add these 13 years to the already mentioned age and you have the present age of several of them working there. Some of the staff are much younger than that. From a mission project that started with a handful of mission-motivated youngsters, the team has increased to somewhere between 18 to 25 youngsters. From a humble beginning, with first landscaping and a mission school, it has developed into a more developed project with different departments. There you have the IBC, which is the mission school. The CBS, which is the bilingual primary school. The health center. Agriculture. Industries. And the SEA, which is at the moment not active, but which took care of children with special needs. What does this have to do with you? There is great need for you, who is able to speak English, who has a burden for children, and who has a love for mission work. To hear the Macedonian call saying, "Come over to Honduras, El Suyatal, and help us." Campos Blancos School is a bilingual primary school for the kids from the village. But more than that, it is the opportunity to plant valuable biblical principles and knowledge of Christ into the minds of children. One period a day is given to Bible instruction per grade. The long-term dream is, of course, to infiltrate the village with the Advent message. A school is an amazing tool to change a community. Martin Luther developed a school system by which areas that before were primarily Catholic became Protestant. The reverse, unfortunately, also happened in Germany. Areas that before had become Protestant again became Catholic when they reintroduced a Catholic school system. Campos Blancos School, which means white fields, received its name from John chapter 4, verse 35. Jesus says, "Do you not say that it is yet 4 months and the harvest comes? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and see the fields, because they are already white toward harvest." The school has sufficient Spanish-speaking teachers. What is sorely needed are people that speak English and that dare to take a huge leap of faith in order to move on a short notice to Honduras to serve there for about a year or less, if that is what you can give as a teacher. Now, the good thing is you do not need to be a teacher to qualify. The school year starts in February and lasts until the end of November, beginning of December. Due to the pandemic, lots of the classes in 2020 had, and most likely also this coming year, to be taught not in direct contact but digitally. Yet, CBS is constantly looking for ways to increase the personal contact. See part of the CBS Report 2020 in the description below. While I was visiting Vida myself twice in 2018 and 2019, I had the opportunity to teach the students of the mission school and observed every day the self-sacrificing work of the whole staff at Vida. I was impressed by their hard work. Even now, during vacation time, 2 of the teachers are teaching different students that had challenges due to the digital learning. Have you become interested? Here's the list of possible teaching opportunities. As you will notice, it says further down that they will need a teacher for 7th to 10th grade. By faith, they are moving forward to continue teaching even the upper grades. Please, do not be scared by what you're reading. There's a curriculum for all the subjects and also teaching material. Yet, you will still need to use a lot of creativity to teach. There are also other English-speaking teachers that will surely be willing to help you. But here, the opportunities. 5th grade teacher. Teaching Bible, language, grammar, phonics, math, social studies, science, spelling, reading. The same for the 6th grade teacher. And there is a need for a science teacher which needs to know physics and chemistry for the 7th to the 10th grade. An English teacher for the 7th to the 10th grade. A math teacher for the 7th to the 10th grade. A social studies teacher for the 7th to the 10th grade. And last but not least, a music teacher for the 1st to the 10th grade. If you feel a call to go and support Vida, but don't see yourself working as a teacher, there's also an urgent need for people that could work in the health department and a person that would be responsible for the PR department. In case you should have questions concerning the teaching or one of the other departments, you can contact me at timoadventist@gmail.com. And I can bring you directly in touch with one of the staff members or my good friend Heike. She lives in Germany but has worked for Vida, living in Honduras for 4.5 years and visits Vida on a yearly basis. You can also look at the website of Vida, which is vida-international.org. It would be so wonderful if you would go. You would be a great gift. May God bless you.
Gracias.
I'm delighted to be able to share a little bit of my testimony today, the good things that God has done for me, and I hope that it is an inspiration for those of you watching. For those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Ron Meinhardt, and I am a health evangelist, background in nursing and public health, but for the past 15 years, I guess, 10 years pretty much full-time, I've been in full-time gospel health evangelism, I would call it. And if you don't know what that is, I'll definitely get to explain that today during my testimony experience. But we'll start with a little background information on my family. And it's interesting that we are conducting this interview halfway across the world, thanks to modern technology. But I do have some roots back there in Norway. In fact, I have a relative who has been tracing our genealogy, and she sent a picture of one of my great great grandmothers who was in Norway and came over on a ship. Don't remember the name of it, but came over to the United States um, over 100 years ago, of course. But I do have some roots there, I guess. So thank you all so much for bringing me back over there digitally and allowing me to share my experience of how the Lord has used me and also my family as well. So starting out as a little background, I grew up in a kind of a rural environment. I can remember um, going out on our little farm that my parents were, I think they were renting at the time. And I can remember just being a young lad, able to run around, chase the farm animals, and had an older friend that lived next door, and just had a great time growing up until I was about 5 years old. When I reached that age, I had an older sister who was 6. My parents decided that we needed to have a better education or outlook from what they could see happening growing up in that rural environment. So they decided when I was 5 years old and my sister was 6 years old to move us to Washington, D.C. And we ended up relocating in a completely different environment. No longer were we in the country where I could kind of run free and grow up with the the twigs and the leaves and the grass and the trees. I was in an urban environment, and I don't think my parents quite understood what we were getting into when we made that move because it ended up being almost a lockdown situation because the place where we moved was very unsafe. And my parents did not even want us to go outside by ourselves. So it was a night and day. It was a culture shock for me, really. But we learned to adapt. My sister and I would kind of make a jungle out of the room we were living in, to my mom's dismay. But it was about this time that my parents actually separated. My father had been very abusive to my mother, was involved in drugs, and in fact, I didn't even know this until I think about a year ago. My father had been a member of the Outlaws, one of the most dangerous motorcycle gangs in the United States at that time. I don't think he was currently a member when we moved to Washington, D.C., but he had that in his past, which was kind of strange because my father grew up as the son of a missionary doctor. They were Seventh-day Adventists, a Seventh-day Adventist family. My grandfather went to Loma Linda, decided he did not want to just pursue after wealth and status, and so they decided to become missionaries. They went over to Okinawa and helped to, if not start, well, get off to good standing the Adventist hospital there in Okinawa, in Japan. And so my father grew up with, I believe, a good foundation for a strong faith, but he let it by the wayside for some reason, and unfortunately, I really have never found out why. Um, but my mom was on her own, and it was a difficult time for her. Um, it was a difficult time for us as well because we were struggling for identity. What do we do in this new land of this concrete jungle, so to speak? And we learned to cope, I guess. I don't remember a lot from that period of my life, but I do remember when I was 6.5 years old, hearing a message, and I'm not sure who I got this from. I was in a summer camp at my school, and someone called me and said, Ronnie, which is my childhood nickname, Ronnie, your dad has just passed away. And I can remember not understanding what that meant. And there were a couple boys there at the school that I was trying to form a friendship with. They were the cool guys at the school. And I can remember going up to them as we were getting ready to leave that day, saying, "My dad just died." And they looked at me in horror. Um, and I really don't know why. I was kind of in a shock and not really understanding how to process things. Well, over the next couple days, the reality of it all set in, going to my dad's funeral. We're still not sure the reason why he passed away. Could have been a drug overdose, could have been even a homicide. We don't know. And for me, that was a huge blow. Even though my mother and my father were separated at that time through divorce, still losing your father is a huge, it's a huge impact. And I think my life would never be the same because of that, for better or for worse. And I'll explain what that means as we go on. My mother remarried, and we moved a little bit out of the city into more of the suburbs and started to have, I guess, a more normal suburban life. Went to school, came home. My mother was a Seventh-day Adventist. My stepfather was Seventh-day Adventist. Started going to church, and things were good, I guess. I guess if you could see us going to church, you would say, "Oh, they're the average, Seventh-day Adventist family. Looks like they're doing well." But things weren't all that well, and in my life especially, I I was going to a public school, and I think that was a main part of the issue that I started to face, and that was just struggling with the concept of, does God really exist? And starting to embrace more of the atheistic sentiments of my science teachers, because my thought was, if they're the science teachers, they're the authority, then they must know what they're talking about. And God must not exist then. This must be just some kind of social network that people get into. And to my appearances, it didn't even seem like they were that happy doing it. And that's kind of my philosophy, it was my philosophy for the next decade. And I think I became more and more calloused to the concept, the idea that there really was a God and He cared about me, He loved me. Even though I grew up with that and I grew up just embracing it, I can remember going to prophecy seminars and going to church. I even was baptized when my sister chose to be baptized. I didn't really know what it meant. I can remember the day of my baptism. Right after I came up out of the water, went back into the room, and as I was changing my clothes, I thought to myself, I've really got to be good now because all my sins were just washed away, and I can't afford to do anything else. I can't afford to commit any more sins. And I kind of resolved in my mind that I better be careful. Now, for the next 3 days, I was very careful, but then I did something and I thought, oh no, I've blown it. I might as well give up now. That was my concept of religion, believe it or not. And I think that even though it may not be so widely understood, it is the concept that most people view religion as, the concept of righteousness by faith, in faith in the atoning blood of Christ and His mediation to cleanse us from the sins that so easily beset us, is something that it takes some study and some understanding to really grasp. It takes a life lived in that philosophy to fully to ascertain the breadth of the goodness of God towards us. Because while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So precious truth. Unfortunately, I didn't understand that at that time. So I was kind of setting myself up for trouble. When I went to high school, I became involved in a lot of science projects and engineering competitions. I actually went to a couple national engineering competitions and even placed there, won awards. And so that became my passion. Just it was a good thing in a sense because it kept me out of trouble, at least for that time. Um, my friends that were seeing me at the time, I guess you would consider them just highly intellectual. Some would call them nerds, but I'm glad I was in that crowd because if not, I definitely would have gone astray. How do I know that? Because when college came around and my priorities somehow started to change, that's what happened to me. I can remember I was going through some relationship troubles in college, and I felt heartbroken because of something that had happened to me. And that very night, when I felt like I was at the lowest of my low, um, a knock happened on my college dorm room, and I was going to a Seventh Day Adventist college, by the way, which is a whole different story of how I ended up there. Don't have time to bring that out, but maybe in another interview we can talk about that issue. But ended up going to a Seventh Day Adventist college. I wanted to go to an engineering school, but I decided I was going to play baseball. So you see my priorities, and I could play baseball at the collegiate level at this Seventh Day Adventist school. Okay, so I went ahead and told you. um, but something happened that actually transformed that whole motive, and that was I had an injury during a summer league game at the college, and I fractured my wrist. I couldn't play baseball anymore. So here I am at a college that I didn't want to be at. I doesn't have an engineering program, and I'm just kind of lost. And then throw in the relationship issue, and here's this knock on the door. So I'm at the low point, and this guy I had just met maybe a week before, not really known very well, knocked on my door. He said, "Ron, come, you wanna smoke weed with us, smoke marijuana with us?" And up until this point, I would have never even contemplated the thought because I saw my father struggling with drugs and alcohol addiction, and I thought I never want to see that happen in my life. But when I was at my lowest, Satan came with these temptations, and I got hooked. And the story of my life for the next 4 years was just one of, I guess you could say, seeking after hedonistic pleasures because I was trying to find some peace in this world. I was trying to find some tranquility from the emotions and the stresses that were raging in my mind. I didn't know where I was going, and the future was very unclear for me. And so I decided that I didn't care. I wasn't going to care about it. I was going to live for the present. And if God really didn't exist, then why not? Why live your life in a box with artificial confinement if you don't need to? And that was my philosophy. And so one step led to another. And before I knew it, I dropped out of school. I was kind of living it up. I guess I was kind of like the prodigal because I had just come into a small inheritance, and it was around the same time everything collided in my life at the same time. This pursuit of pleasure, inheritance, and here I am, the prodigal son, going away from home. Ended up in an apartment, sharing an apartment with some other guys who were doing the very same things that I was doing, and I think we were all miserable deep down inside. I know I was. And it seemed like every milestone that I achieved in my thought processes of, oh, this is going to satisfy me, this is going to help me, this is going to give me fulfillment, um, in a selfish kind of way, it would always leave me more and more depressed. And I became a very depressed individual. I had always been interested in photography and dabbled with that in high school. Um, and any artist is going to show you their emotions through their works. And I can look back at the photographs that I had taken, the artistic photographs I had taken during this time. They were very dark and foreboding. And I could just, it just was a reflection of what was going on in my life because I was miserable. And yet on the outside, if a young person had looked at me, they would say, "Oh, probably was a temptation to many young people." They'd say, "Oh, Ron is having a great time. You know, look, he's having all the pleasure he could ever hope for." I want to be like that. And I know I did lead a few astray. I was, the Bible says, deceiving and being deceived. These wicked men will wax worse and worse. And that's who I was. I was waxing worse and worse. But the thing about it is, when you wax worse and worse, it's not like you're becoming more and more fulfilled. It's evil has a tendency to disguise itself. And when we embrace it personally, it is the most deceptive master that we can serve because it does not truly give us that pure satisfaction we're looking for in life. And years to come, I realized the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure center of the brain, and how that works, and how when we engage in pleasures that are abnormal, where an abnormal or high amount, tremendously high amount of dopamine is secreted in the nucleus accumbens, it downgrades every other normal pleasure. So what does that mean? You can no longer find pleasure in the normal things of life. You have to be doing something outrageous, and not in a good way, outrageous, something that will increase your secretion of dopamine to addictive levels. Everything you do has to become an addiction, basically. You embrace a life of sin because sin is addictive. And all it takes is one addiction to do that, even if it's a small addiction. Even a sugar addiction can do it. And I'm trying to educate my children on this because they've inherited the sweet tooth that I have. And we know that honey is good, but too much of it is not. It's not. We have to be temperate in all things. But intemperance, even in the things that are good, can lead to addiction. So we need that gift of the Holy Spirit to lead us through this life so that we can truly enjoy the world around us. Because living in an artificial world where we're addicted, we only seek pleasure through addiction, it's a miserable existence. It's terrible because we can't live a normal life. We're living in an alternate reality. And in fact, it's Satan's reality. It's the reality that he tries to paint, that he says, this is the way the world should be. If I was in control, if I was the big man up in heaven, this is the way it would be. Well, then everyone would be completely miserable, and devastation and destruction would follow wherever these people went. How do I know that? Because I experienced it. I experienced it myself. And so 4 years down the road after going on this, I would say this downward spiral, I started to question things. And for me, it was the beginning of a huge turning point in my life. I can remember I dropped out of school. My cousin had also dropped out of school. We were both doing the same things. Unfortunately, we're not encouraging each other in righteousness. And he called me up one day. He said, "Ron, I'm going to go on spring break. You want to come with me?" And I thought to myself, we're not in school. Why do we need to go on spring break? You know? He said, "Oh, because that's the time everyone in college goes partying." And I thought, okay, it sounds like a good idea. So scrounged up what little bit of money I had left and bought an airline ticket and went out to Southern California. And my cousin and I we just went out there and started living it up for about a week. And I can remember sitting at a country club out in the hot tub with a number of our friends, just looking up at the stars. We're down in Palm Springs, California, and at nighttime, when there's not a lot of light pollution, you can see the stars. It's an amazing picture to look up and see the starry host that God has created, bringing them out one by one. He knows each by name. It's just a tremendous witness or testimony to His greatness. Well, I wasn't necessarily thinking about that when I was looking up at the stars, but as I was looking, one of my friends, he kind of half whispered to me, said, "Ron, do you think there's a God? And as I didn't even look at him, as I continued gazing up in that starry expanse, I said almost unconsciously, there must be. There must be. And I repeated that over and over in my mind. Did I really say that? Really? There must be a God? Wow, that's a novel concept now. And I would say that the remainder of that trip, I can remember just mulling this over and over and over in my mind. And a battle was starting to rage. A battle between what could be and what I thought was the present reality. Hope started to spring up in my mind. And by the time we got back to our spring break vacation was over, I got back to my apartment, I was really, really questioning things. I can remember my friends there at the apartment got together, and it was the weekend. They said, let's go into Washington, D.C. to our favorite nightclub. And I was the one who drove everyone down there. Well, they walk in, and I'm kind of lagging behind. I walk in, take one look around. I must have been in there for 30 seconds, and I just walk out. I leave. I don't tell anyone where I'm going, and I don't really even care. I just was completely disgusted. And I didn't even know why. I just left. I just didn't want to be there. And it had started to rain, and we were in downtown Washington, D.C. at night, not in the best neighborhood, but I didn't care. I just was going for a walk in the rain. And I look over, and there's this huge building, but there's a little, almost a little indentation in the bricks that went back about 8 feet, and it was up a little over my head. And I decided I'm going to go in there and get some relief from this rain. Well, as I start to duck into this area, I notice I'm not alone. In fact, there's about 25 homeless men in there as well. And this is just a short stretch away from the nightclub. And I noticed something. These homeless men, um, they might have been looking at me. I really don't know, but I know at least quite a few of them were looking over at the nightclub. And they were watching the people with their well-dressed appearances going into the nightclub. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, what's going on here? And then I blurt out, I said, why are you looking at them going into the nightclub? They're not happy. You know what? To be happy in this world, all you need is Jesus. And I heard a few hearty amens that night. But I couldn't even believe that I had said that, because that was not necessarily something that I had accepted. Yet I was becoming an evangelist for a concept that I had only thought about, that I had only hoped that might exist. But that night, something happened. And as I was saying those words, I started to have this peace come into my heart. And I thought, I'm going to do something even more here. And I went and I didn't have a lot of money, but I had a whole lot of quarters, 25-cent pieces in my car. And I got all the quarters that I could find, scrounged up all the money I could find, and I went back to those homeless men and I gave each one of them some money that night. And I spent the remainder of the evening just with them, just spending time with them, and I don't even remember what I did, honestly. But I remember when it was time for us to leave the nightclub, my friends, I saw them walking out and I started walking toward them. I was much more happy than they were, much more. I think they had commented that they hadn't seen me, but I guess they wondered, well, why is he so happy? Oh, but it was quite an experience. And one that I did not soon forget. The next day or two, can't remember how long it was after that, I had a friend who had come down from his apartment that was right above us in the apartment complex. And he was the son of a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, believe it or not, but he had also embraced a lifestyle that was not really conducive to a relationship with Jesus. And for some reason, I didn't really realize it then, but I guess it was, well, I know it was just the Holy Spirit moving on his heart. He decided he was going to get some graph paper and chronicle all the prophecies in the book of Daniel, and to write out a whole timeline, 2300 day, 490 day year timeline. And he said, Ron, I want to show you something. So we sit down and he opens up this. And by the way, I was under the influence of some kind of substance at the time that he did this, and I think he was too. But definitely God can still speak to us at any point in our experience. But as he unrolled this and he pointed out the different dates, he showed the scriptures, the Bible verses. I had this epiphany, this moment where I just suddenly realized something. And this is what it was. This is what I said to myself. The Bible is real. The Bible is real. You cannot make this up. The Bible is real. God must be real then. And for the remainder of that night, I kept thinking about this internal monologue. And I thought, am I ready? Am I ready to give up? Give up this because I'm tired of it. And it got to this one point where I looked around at my friends. It was later that evening. They were all passed out or inebriated. And I started to reflect upon my life. By looking at them, I started to think, okay, this is what I am. I'm a loser. I really am. I'm a loser. And I don't mean to use that term in a derogatory way. I think all of us can be and should be winners in Jesus Christ. But I was wasting that heritage. And as I looked at my friends, I realized I didn't want to be like that anymore. And I got down on my knees, and I had not prayed in a long time, and sincere prayer even longer. But I got down on my knees, and I prayed. And I said, Lord, please take this life from me and live it for me, because I'm tired of wasting it. I'm tired of wasting it. And as I got up off of my knees and I sat back down on the couch, it was almost as if the room was filled with angels. I mean, I didn't see any angels, but just the peace that flooded my heart. It was amazing. I'd never experienced anything like this before. And all of a sudden, my mind just started to race and start to realize all of these things that God had promised, all of these things that I had forsaken as a youth. They were for our good. They were for my ultimate pleasure. We're told that in heaven we'll experience pleasures forevermore at God's right hand. God wants us to be happy, and it's a true happiness. He's the only one. He's our maker. He's the only one who knows what it takes to make humanity truly satisfied and truly happy. And as I embraced that thought, I started just thinking and reflecting upon this new life. And I can remember very distinctly saying to myself, Ron, today you have become a man. Today you've become a man. And I think I was 20, 21 or 22 when this happened. Up until this time, I'd always thought, when I turn 18, I'll be a man. When I turn 21, I'll be a man, having these new legal freedoms. But there was always a struggle. In fact, I can remember talking to this gentleman who was a senior in college. He seemed to be very wise. And he would tell me, Ron, you're a freshman and you act like one. And and he said, you got the freshman mentality. And I never knew what that meant. I don't know if he even really knew what it meant, because he was also living a very unhealthy lifestyle, a very destructive lifestyle. But one thing was for sure, I realized what it meant to be a man that night. To truly be a man means to acknowledge the one who made man in the beginning, the one who called man into existence. And for me, that was a turning point. That night was a turning point in my life. But the next morning I woke up and I realized I was still fighting with the old man because I was addicted to tobacco, addicted to nicotine. And I had tried to stop smoking so many times on my own before, but it seemed impossible for me to do it. And I even had realized this must be some type of spiritual warfare because the thing that I hated to do, I would just go back to it. I would rip up a pack of cigarettes and throw them in the trash, and then the next hour I'd be back at the gas station buying more. So I realized that I couldn't control myself in this addiction. And that morning when I was having this urge, almost uncontrollable, I thought, urge to smoke, I got down on my knees and I prayed. I said, Lord, I've tried so many times on my own to stop this. Please help me. I know you'll help me because I know you don't want me to do this anymore. And as I got up off my knees, I had this impression, almost like a drill sergeant in the military was giving me this order: drop down and give me 20. And I knew that referred to doing 20 push-ups. So I got down on the ground, and I had hated push-ups prior to this. In fact, I still don't like push-ups all that much. I'll do them. But I started to do 20 push-ups every time I had that urge to smoke again. And I stopped counting at about 180 push-ups that day. I don't know how many I did, but the next morning I was so sore, I did not even think about it. I did not even want to think about smoking. I wish I could leave it at that and say I gained the victory overnight. In a sense, I did. But I struggled 3 more days. And then on the third day, I had a friend come over and told me, Ron, you know, the best way to quit smoking is just to smoke less cigarettes. And so here, come smoke a cigarette with me. And that was a terrible temptation. I smoked half that cigarette, felt it burning my lungs, threw the cigarette down, and never wanted to touch it again. And I also realized God's forgiveness too, because He knows that we are just, but He wants to give us the victory. And as long as we turn to Him, He will do it for us. Satan would have tempted me, and I think he did tempt me at that time. Oh, see, you've done it again. You've blown it. But I think somehow I'd progressed beyond that primitive understanding of the gospel, and I was embracing the righteousness of Christ. Even though I really wasn't a student of the Bible, I started to read. And my favorite verse at that time was Isaiah 40, verse 31. Even youth shall faint and be weary, and young men shall utterly fall. But those that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. So for me, finding these precious promises, I would hold on to them like they were jewels. And even though I was living in an apartment with still the old man was reflected every day when I would look at my friends, I was creating a bulwark of protection around me with God's promises. And something started to happen at that apartment. Prior to this point, it was this dingy, smoke-stained, ill-lit apartment that really no one would want to go into. The landlord knew what was going on there, so he didn't put any money into fixing it, even though we would request it time and time again. But I decided I was going to do something. I got some paint. I marshaled my roommates, and we all painted the apartment. I couldn't afford a steam cleaner to clean the carpet, so I did the next best thing. I got some carpet cleaner, a bucket, a brush, scrub brush, and a rolled vacuum, and I scrubbed every part of that, or at least the main living area, until it was white. Now the carpet was kind of brown. I didn't realize it could be white. It actually was a white carpet, um, but I cleaned it, and I can remember the drug dealer coming over and sitting down on the couch and just looking at me and saying, "What's going on with Ron? What's he doing?" And my friends were like, "Oh, he's just cleaning up." They were thankful that I was doing this, um, because hey, someone needed to do it. The place was filthy, and so I kept getting these comments from people. What's he doing? What's Ron doing? And one thing my friends started to notice was I became stronger. I started to build some muscles and these kind of things. Had better sporting abilities, I guess you could say. And they didn't, all of them probably didn't realize, but I had started to exchange not only the push-ups, but exchange bad habits for good habits. And I started running at this time, exercising, riding bikes, just being outside. I wanted to build up my body because I knew I had been so neglectful and so destructive over the years. And I really embraced the message of health and healing before I even realized that we had a health message or even really read the Bible. I just I wanted to do everything that I could to redeem my mistakes from the past. And so I became very healthy, very fit. Um, and I started to kind of reflect on reflect this attitude on my peers there at the apartment. I could see sometimes my friends starting to get ready to have one of their festivities of unrighteousness, and I would go grab one of my friends and I said, "Hey, let's go ride, like let's go jog, do something." And oftentimes I would get one of them to come with me, and I started to be focused not just on me, but also wanting my friends to experience this peace that I had in my life. And I put up these paintings and motivational placards throughout the house. I had a sports car. I sold it because I wanted to have the money to buy healthy food. And I wasn't working at the time, so I realized that that could be very expensive, especially eating a group of hungry young men besides myself. And but I did it, and my roommate, especially a picture of unmotivation, I guess you could say. He was the son of a famous soccer star to the U.S., and just like me, he'd been injured in a preliminary game. He had played at the collegiate level, soccer, football, as you would call it, and he was very unmotivated. Um, I got this poster, was a kind of a frame poster, and put it above his bed. And it said, "Motivation, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a few steps," or the first step. And I put that there. And my friends, they started to realize, here's a different Ron, but we don't really mind because we know he cares about us. He's fixing the place up. He wants to help us be healthy. And they actually like that. They embrace that. Um, or so I thought. I was getting ready to go to church one Sabbath, and it was my custom to go every Sabbath on time to church because I just knew God had a blessing for me there. Even if it was disguised somehow, I was there to search it out and to claim that blessing. And as I was getting ready to go to church, I had my Bible in one hand and kind of under my shoulder, tucked under my coat here. And I was walking out the door, and I look over, and my friends, they're drawing the curtains and they're getting the projector out and video games and the drugs and things. And I realized, oh, they're getting ready to start one of their parties. But I'm going to go see if anyone wants to come to church with me. So I went over where the couches were in the living room, and not only were my roommates there, but also some friends. And I said, hey, anyone want to go to church with me? Because Pastor so-and-so is going to be preaching. I think it's going to be really good. And they're like, oh, no. Okay, so I said, okay, well, I'll see you all later. And I start towards the door, and as soon as I have my hand on the door handle and I start to turn the handle, I hear this shout from behind me. And I look around, and it's one of our friends. He has jumped up off the couch, and he's yelling at me. He said, Ron, you can't do this to us anymore. I said, what? What did I do? He said, you've got to choose today. You've got to choose us or God. And I just looked at him and smiled. I said, okay, I choose God. I'll see you all later. It was, the Lord just gave me wisdom to handle that. But it was just natural because I love these guys. I wanted them to experience that same peace that I had. And I went to church that day, of course, got home, and still continue my ministry to these guys. At a certain point, my mom actually heard about the transformations that were occurring in my life. And about a year prior to this, she had actually disowned me. She sent me a letter that said, I no longer consider you my son because of the things that you are doing. Please don't come to the house anymore. Well, she sent me another letter and said, please come home. And I knew what I needed to do. And so I moved out of the apartment, told my friends goodbye, and started a different life. Started going back to school. Even though I met with a lot of difficulties, I can remember the first day I showed up to register for my classes, there was a couple there who had, by all intents and purposes, not really been living a Christian life. I was kind of the scum of the college, I guess, but I knew what everyone else was doing too because I would see them at these parties, and oftentimes they would kind of hide what they were doing and try to live a double life. I didn't want to do that, so I ended up being the black sheep of the college. But I can remember hearing this couple whispering, and not even, it was definitely in audible tones, saying, what's Ron doing back here? And I just thought to myself, I'm not going to say anything to them. I will show them by my life that I've changed. And that was my goal, was not to try to win people's affections and change their opinions toward me, but just be true to God. And I just had this peace that no one could take from me, because I knew this was it. This was the life I needed to live. It was interesting because, as any newfound Christian will understand or experience, I went through some shaky times. Still, we're not immune to discouragement when we become Christians. We're not immune to trial. And I started going through some of these things. My mom and stepfather were considering a divorce, and some things were not good at home. And I started to become somewhat discouraged, but something happened that really encouraged me. About 6 months after I had moved out of the apartment, I went to visit with my roommate and the friend who had jumped up and shouted at me that one day, you got to choose God or us. And then they had a new apartment. They had somewhat of a new life too, I apprehended. But one thing they had that surprised me, my roommate had become a Christian. He started going back to church. And the young man who had shouted at me to choose him or choose God, well, he decided to choose God as well. So for me, that was a little glimpse of the glories of heaven, of being able to see those that we've labored for and we've loved, able to experience the same joy and peace that we have, and not just on this world, but eternally so. So that was much needed. And I think looking at Jesus, we're told that he was looking to us. That's what got him through the darkness of his betrayal, his crucifixion, was that he was beholding the unseen. He was by faith grasping the concept that others would accept him and be benefited eternally by his sacrifice and by his suffering. For the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and that joy was to see us saved in the kingdom. And so I started to realize the greatest pleasures of this world don't come from satisfying ourselves, but they come from living unselfishly, from helping others, not being neglectful of ourselves. I'm not saying that, but not being self-seeking, not putting the good of ourselves above the good of others. And just was a new way of life for me. I can't say that I never went through trials again, but this was the turning point in my life. This was the turning point experience. I think I probably have to do a part 2 if I'm going to get you all up to speed with where I am today and where I was at that point. But I'll give a quick summary for those of you who'd like to know. Ended up choosing a major in college, one that I thought I could use to help people. That was my main motive, to help people. I went into nursing and got a 4-year degree in nursing. But I started, around this time, I started to read the Spirit of Prophecy. And this was the first time I had even accepted Ellen White as a prophet, only because of what I read in the book Medical Ministry. And in fact, let me just give you that story, because this is pretty amazing. And then I'll conclude. So I'd gone through nursing school, and I was really wondering what to do. I guess my main goal had become not just simply to help people, and that's why I went into nursing. But it had slowly transformed into, let's get the highest paying job and let's get the most credentials. And I don't know how that happened. It was a subtle transformation through my 3 years of continual education there. But by the time I got out, I had signed up for my board exams, and I realized that I had made a mistake because I had not given myself time to study. I had signed up for my board exam to take place 2 weeks after I graduated from nursing school. And I didn't know that you're supposed to wait a whole summer, maybe 4 or 5 months at minimum, and go through all of your nursing textbooks again and study all the refresher courses and all these things. I didn't realize that. So when I graduated and I had to move from our college, and my fiance at the time, we moved all the way to Chicago from Maryland. And then I had to help my mom move from from Maryland to North Carolina. And so by the time I was ready to study, I had just a short amount of time, maybe less than a week. And I had all my nursing textbooks laid out on my bookshelf. And there was another book, a little red book. You know what? Here it is right here. Medical Ministry by Ellen White. I had purchased this book, I thought, on a whim. I was at the ABC one day and I was looking through all of the books on water, the benefits of drinking water, because I was asked to write a report on the benefits of drinking water and present it to a local retirement community. And that turned out to be a huge blessing in many ways, even is still blessing many people today, that little report. But I picked up that book because I thought, oh, the medical ministry, I might need this one day. So just put it on my stack of books that I was purchasing. And this was before the internet really was a wealth of resources, in terms of, you could find more on the internet now than you can in the library or the bookstore, but it seemed you could find still more at the bookstore at that time. So I got all these materials, and I had that book. I never read it. I put it on the bookshelf, never read it until it was time for me to study for my boards. And I got down on my knees and I realized I was in urgent crisis. And I was about to pray, Lord, please show me what I need to study or to know to pass my boards, which was really a selfish prayer because of my current motives and aspirations. But I didn't pray that prayer. I prayed, Lord, please show me what I need to know to help people. And it was almost like that last phrase was interjected into my prayer because it took me off guard. I was shocked. What? To help people? Oh, that's right. That was the reason I went into nursing school, to help people. And so I look over at my nursing textbooks, and then I look over and see this little book, this little red book. And I feel impressed that there's something in here that I needed to know. And so I said, God, I'm going to spend half of my time in the nursing textbooks and the other half of the time in this book right here. And I don't know how many rotations I went through. It was not many. And as you can see, there's still underlining and highlighting in here from, you can't see the underline, but there's highlights or underlines in there, not highlights, from that first study. But I stopped the rotation and I started only reading this book. And I'm not a person that's really vocal usually in being an attendee in a worship service, but I was vocal. I was praising the Lord out loud. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. This is truth. You could hear all these things. And I think that my fiance's parents heard these things. I was in the upper room, one of the bedrooms, studying these things, and they're probably wondering, what's that young man doing up there? But I had come across a gold mine of truth, because all the questions that I had during nursing school, all the questions I had in regards to the medical establishment, the way modern medicine operated, all of the questions and difficulties were answered right here in this book. And I realized at that point, this is written by Ellen White. Ellen White is a prophet, because there's no way she could know all this without being inspired. And I have never questioned it since then, the inspiration of Ellen White, because this was a life-changing read for me. And in many ways it still is as I look over these things. But that really sent me off into a different direction. And I'll say this in closing. Prior to reading this, I had been applying to some of the top nursing jobs in the country. And I had really good grades. I had really good test scores. I had a lot of experience, much more experience than most new hire nurses would have, because of my dedication to the study of nursing and internships and externships I had taken during my summers off. And so I had the opportunity to apply. One of the places that I really wanted to work at Rush University Medical Center in downtown Chicago. And this was a very prestigious job. I was going to go straight into the OR, which is what I wanted to do. I had everything planned out, how I could increase my bank account and also the credentials behind my name. And that was my main goal. But reading this book, it put a break on that. Even though I still had this interview I had to go to, and I still was kind of on that track, still thinking this is still what I need to do, I decided, okay, reading this in the book, the instructions given to us as a people, it doesn't seem like the operating room is the ideal place to carry out these things in the fullness of the principles. So maybe I'll go work in public health, because then I can do more teaching, prevention work. And so I decide that on the day that I go to do, and by the way, I passed my boards, praise the Lord, but on the day I go to interview for this job, I decide I'm going to swing by the county health department and apply there first. Well, I didn't realize it, but there were more forms than I probably have ever filled out in my life to fill out a job to work for the county health department. And it took a long time. I had to wait a while to talk to people. And then finally, when it was all said and done, I look at my clock, my watch, and I think, oh no, I've really got to hurry to get to this appointment at Rush University Hospital. And so I get in my SUV and I'm driving. I get to the parking garage there in Chicago, and right there at Rush University Hospital. And I start driving up the parking garage, realizing there's no parking anywhere. Finally get up to almost the top. I believe it might have even been the top floor of the parking garage. And I park my SUV, look at my clock. Oh, I'll just make it if I really hurry to get over there. So I park my car, run over to the elevator, press the button, and while I'm waiting for the elevator to come up and to bring me down, I look over and I see the skyline of Chicago. I hadn't realized it, but because I had gotten up so high and there was no obstruction, I could see all the skyscrapers. It almost looked like a picture of the skyline of Chicago. And as I'm looking out, I hear this voice, and it says, "All this I will give to you if you will bow down and worship me." And I knew who was saying that. Well, you know what? As I continue looking, I heard the ding of the elevator behind me. And I turned around and I walked back to my car. And I knew the decision I had to make. I got home from the interview, well, from the lack of interview. They had called the house. They said, "We want him to come interview. It's okay that he missed it. We want him to come interview." My father-in-law was upset. "Ron, why didn't you go interview? You need to support my daughter. Get that good job." But I was determined. I was going to go a different route. And that has made all the difference in my life. All the difference. And I can't say it's exempted me from trials, and maybe in some ways it's brought more on. But regardless of the trials, when you're following God's will, you're going to have peace. That's the good thing. Jesus said, "In this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I've overcome the world." God's word is creative. If it doesn't exist, it will exist. And so if he says, "Be of good cheer," then you're going to be of good cheer. I mean, it just, of course, we have to accept that promise. It's still up to us. He's not going to change our thoughts unless we let him, or are willing to be made willing to let him. That subtle willingness that we need, where we deny self and we say, "Lord, please help me." But this will make all the difference in our lives. And daily, it is the struggle of humanity. I can't say that I've arrived or that I don't have any more growth to go through. I know I have much, but I do know this, and that is, when we walk with the Lord, even if we make missteps, He will not leave us. He will continue to guide us, to provide for our needs, because He's already overcome the world. He already has that mansion that He's preparing for us in heaven. He already has those storehouses full of blessings, not only for in heaven, but also for us on this earth. Blessings that those that do not claim the name of Jesus in their lives, it's not for them to ask for. But the blessing of being an accepted son or daughter of Jesus Christ, and being made one with Him and being presented to the Father spotless, is of inestimable value. There's no other thing in this world that comes even close. Even if we're destitute of every other earthly convenience and we're locked in a dungeon, we can still have peace than the King upon the throne. And that's the heritage of those that follow the Lord Jesus Christ with all their hearts, with all their minds, and all their strength. And by God's grace, I pray this continues to be my story as well. Thank you all so much.